I would want to spend my time with those who are closest to me and tell them important things, like how much I love them, and if I could, I would be with them forever. As someone who has worked with children a lot, I see Jesus also as a teacher. During this Passover meal commemorating the Exodus from Egypt, he spends his time doing show and tell, having snack time and sharing, leading question time and song time in the upper room in a house in Jerusalem. Jesus does show and tell. He shows his students, the disciples, how to be servants by washing their feet, and tells them in John chapter 13, verses 14 and 15, "If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you should do as I have done to you." Then in John 13, verse 34, Jesus tells them, "A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another, as I have loved you, that ye also love one another." Jesus has snack time and sharing. According to Luke chapter 22, when they finish the meal, Jesus breaks the bread and blesses it and says, "This is my body which is given for you. This do in remembrance of me." Then he also takes the cup, gives thanks, and says, "This cup is the New Testament in my blood, which is shed for you." They eat and share what is likened to the cup of a traditional Jewish marriage proposal. According to Mike Donaghy of the band 10th Avenue North, if a cup the man offers is taken to drink, the proposal has been accepted, and the man goes to his home of his father to build a place for his new bride. Then he returns for her when his father agrees that it is ready. This could be at any time, so she must be ready to go with him whenever he arrives. This is how we are to wait for Jesus' return. Jesus has question time, when he tells the disciples that one of them will betray him, and each one of them asks, "Is it I?" Jesus finally leads them in song time. Matthew 26, verse 30 says, "And when they had sung a hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives." I suppose this shows us that Jesus even took his students on field trips.
For their field trip, they went to the Garden of Gethsemane, which is in the Mount of Olives. This is the time when Jesus was being prepared. He knew everything was coming to happen at this point. There was no turning back. He even said, as it had been written, "The shepherd will be struck and the sheep will be scattered," which was written in Zechariah chapter 13, verse 7, almost 550 years earlier. So it's all of him and the disciples are going to the garden, and then he decides to break off with a few and go even further into the olive grove to pray. And that verse that really struck home with me is Matthew 26:39, which reads, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." This is where Jesus really beginning to feel the pressure of the world on him, because it is literally all of the world's sin and iniquity coming down on him. And he's also beginning to feel his separation from God, which he never probably felt in his life before. And it's got to be a terrible thing to be separated from your Father. It's almost like when you move out on your own for the first time. You just kind of lose that safety of home and that feeling. As he's gone off to prepare himself and pray this prayer 3 times, he returns and finds the disciples asleep, which to me shows that how sometimes man can fail you, and you have to be prepared to deal with that. The final blow of man's iniquity at this point is when Judas shows up in the garden with a whole bunch of the Roman army with him and singles him out to be executed, or arrested, forgive me. And he is dragged off into the night. It's kind of weird for me being on the opposite end of the church for once. So, on the hearing, then the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus answered, I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where all the Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who heard what I said to them. They know what I said. When he had said this, one of the police standing nearby struck Jesus on the face, saying, Is that how you answer the high priest? And Jesus answered, If I have spoken wrongly, testify to the wrong. But if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me? The thing that interests me most about this passage, though, is comparing it to the other versions in the other Gospels. And Jesus' response to being asked if he's the Messiah is different in each one of the versions. But it always ends the same way. It always ends up getting taken away and sent off to another trial. But I just find it interesting that no matter what he says, they declare him guilty. And he could have just come out and said, no, you got the wrong guy, I'm not the Messiah. And they still probably would have sent him off anyway. So, I find that interesting.
The trial is taken from Matthew 26, verse 59 through 66. Now the chief priests and the whole council kept trying to obtain false testimony against Jesus so that they might put him to death. They did not find any, even though many false witnesses came forward. But later on, 2 came forward and said, This man stated, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. The high priest stood up and said to him, Do you not answer? What is it that these men are testifying against you? But Jesus kept silent, and the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God that you tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus said to him, You have said it yourself. Nevertheless, I tell you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming into the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his robes and said, He has blasphemed. What further need do we have of witnesses? Behold, you have now heard the blasphemy. What do you think? They answered, He deserves death. So to me, Caiaphas, who is the high priest, is a bully. And it's whether you're at school or whether you're at work, there will always be people like him. They will try and get you in trouble, they will insult you, and they will have other people tell lies about you. But even as they are the ones that are bringing you down, it seems as if everyone else thinks they're the good guys. And they put them in places of leadership and in positions of power, and they're the ones that get all the good treatment. But yet, as soon as you try and take a stand against them and try and show them for the mean person they are, you're the one that looks like the bully. You're the one that is treated as if you are targeting them, as if you are trying to take over their position. And so Jesus knows this. He knows that as soon as he tries to speak up in defense of himself, no one will believe him, and he will essentially be incriminating himself. And so Caiaphas and all the other elders wanted some excuse to put him to death. We are lucky enough that our versions of Caiaphas are generally not trying to kill us. But that doesn't necessarily make it any easier to live with. And this kind of torment is just, it erodes you essentially. But we must remember to try and live as Jesus, and remember what is our truth, that we are Christians, we have the power of the promise of God, and if we trust in him, the truth will be revealed. The bully will be shown as the truly mean-spirited person they are, and we will not be dirtied by stooping to them.
At this point, Jesus has been arrested, and he's brought before the governor. And Pilate asks him, Are you the king of the Jews? Jesus replies, Yes, it is, as you said. But as he asks him more questions, he just remains silent, despite all the charges against him. hoping for a long time to see him perform a miracle. He asked Jesus question after question, but Jesus refused to answer. Meanwhile, leading priests and teachers of the religious law stood and shouted their accusations. Now Herod and his soldiers began mocking and ridiculing Jesus. They put him in a royal robe and sent him back to Pilate. Now, those started reminding me of Paul. Jesus is all going back and forth between Pilate and Herod. And Herod's about to score a point. So, just sends him right back. And so, because of the Passover celebration, Pilate can bring a prisoner before the crowd and ask to have one of them be released. So he has Barabbas and Jesus. So he kind of goes up to them and he says, okay, we have this Barabbas guy who was a criminal, he murdered people, and we have Jesus the Messiah, and he has done absolutely nothing wrong. So which of these do you want to be released? And they want Barabbas to be released. And he means, no, you mean this guy, right? And they say, no, we want Barabbas to be released. And he says, okay, what do you want me to do with Jesus then? And they all demand that he be crucified. Pilate says, why? What crime has he committed? But they only shouted louder, crucify him. Pilate saw he wasn't getting anywhere and the riot was developing. So he went and sent for a bowl of water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I'm innocent of the blood of this man. The responsibility is yours. And the people yelled back, yes, we will take the responsibility of his death, we and our children. So then they take Jesus away.
At this time, Jesus is led to Golgotha for his crucifixion. He is put amongst criminals, one who insults him and another who rebukes the insulter. The second criminal then says to Jesus, according to Luke chapter 23, verse 42, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And in verse 43, Jesus answered him, I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise. This reminds me of the lyrics of a song called Ancient Love. When will my heart be close to you? My Savior, help me reach your light and your love. Could I stay with you forever? Let me in. Listen to my whisper. Before comes the thunder. Before comes the thunder. It makes me think of the criminal asking for Jesus to remember him when he goes into heaven, wanting to be heard before they die.
It's a funny story, actually. There were two parts that hadn't been handed out yet, and when asked which one I wanted, I said, I'll just take whatever part nobody else wants. So I got two parts. This reading comes from Matthew 27, verse 57 to 66, so it's a little long, so bear with me on this one. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. And it says in Mark, actually, that they had checked with the guard to make sure he was dead, because they weren't sure yet. But so Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn in the rock. Then he rolled a great stone to the door of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, Sir, we remember that the impostor said when he was alive, after 3 days I will rise again. Therefore, command the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise his disciples may go and steal him away and tell the people, he has been raised from the dead, and the last deception will be worse than the first. Pilate said to them, you have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can. So they went with the guard and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone. And this is a total change of mood, but it reminds me of something Frank Nowazik said. He was talking about these people he watches on YouTube that play games, and they were playing this game called Mario Party. And one of them says to the other, I'm going to kill Luigi. I'm going to make his death known throughout the universe. All right, step one, I'm going to take a message in a bottle and send it into space. Then what? I don't know, I didn't think that far. Then why did you number it?
After the Sabbath, at the first day of the week, at the dawning of that week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were going to the tomb. Suddenly, there was a great earthquake. And you don't have to... I don't need to wait. There was a great earthquake. And descending from heaven, an angel of the Lord was coming down. And he came down to the front of the tomb, and he rolled the stone away. And then he sat on the rock. And he looked like he was all in lightning. And his clothing were just as white as snow. And the guards were absolutely, totally afraid. They were in fear of what was happening, and they shook. And they fell down as if dead. The angel said to the women, he said, don't be afraid. Come here, for I know that you are coming here to see Jesus, who was crucified. So fear not. But he is not here. He is risen, as he said. So come and see the place where he lay. And then go quickly and tell my disciples that I will see them in Galilee. And the women left quickly and out of fear and great joy. And they hurried toward Galilee. And suddenly, on the path in front of them, was Jesus. And he said, greetings. And the women were just fell down to their knees and worshiped him and touched his feet. And he said, please, get up. Go and tell my brothers that I have risen, and I will meet them in Galilee.
Now let the heavens be joyful. Let earth the song begin. Let all the world keep triumph, and all that is therein. Let all things seen and unseen their notes in gladness blend. For Christ the Lord has risen, and our joy shall have no